And welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 51. Tonight we're going beyond the selfie, the notion of self-portrait. Self-portraits have been around for several centuries at least, and in fact the chances are they've been around for thousands, if not tens of thousands of years. Wouldn't surprise me at all if those first kind of cave paintings where you have the little stick figure throwing a spear at the buffalo, I'm damn sure the artist will have included himself in those little stick men. So that's pretty much what it's going to be, an introduction to that. I'm also going to be talking about the challenge I'm going to set for next week, which will of course be a self-portrait challenge. However, before you all go sort of run screaming from the room, I'm very aware that most people really do hate having their photo taken, and most photographers, part of the bonus of being the photographer is that you're the other side of the camera, you're not in front of the lens. But I'm hopefully going to try and inspire you a bit tonight to go out there, take an interesting photo of yourself and put it in for next week. Also, we're going to be talking about the critique section. So, coming up, let's swap that round to that, not that, that. There we go. So, yeah, self-portraits and... yes, the critique section. We also have April is wanting to know about the notion of a soft depth of focus, a shallow depth of focus. She keeps hearing the term, she's not totally sure of it. Does this photo count as that? So I'm going to investigate that notion a little bit of aperture, how you can change it and how you can make a real difference about the quality of the softness of the background. Then we also have Becca was playing around with a program on an app she's got, came up with some ideas, is wanting to sort of discuss a little bit more about that. Roy was down at the Eden project in Cornwall, where they've got this quite amazing hexagonal roof. I think the thing was also used in one of the James Bond films. Not one of the best James Bond films, it has to be said, but used there nonetheless. But it's really about that notion of the kind of slightly abstract quality of the roof and how it might be made more interesting and whatever. So we're going to discuss that a little bit. Robert took a photo of a horse and then told me all the reasons why he wasn't going to make any adjustments to it, and then wanted to know what I would do with it. So so I'm going to have some fun with that. I'll play with the horse later. And then we also have Sandra, who was this photo of her nephew in London, up against some walls with graffiti, and basically it's about her use of selective colour, or selective black and white almost in this case. And does it work, and should it work, and when should you use it, or whatever. So we're going to have a little bit of a discussion on the notion of selective colour as well. So that's what we're up against tonight. Should be a fun bumper evening. So here we are, live on Facebook. Let me know you're here. Certainly if this is your first time as well, let me know where you're from. It's always lovely to know where in the world people are tuning in from. If you find this podcast useful, interesting, entertaining, whatever, and would like to support the podcasts, then buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is the place to go. It's not compulsory, but it is always appreciated. Okay, let's see if we have some comments. So Robert says, howdy all from Texas. Shashi has put in a couple of hearts. Maggie, that's my wife in the kitchen next door, says hello everyone. Roy says hi everyone. Roy says okay, but don't call me shortly. Right, okay. My very first comment, I said I'll be with you shortly, and Roy says okay, but don't call me shortly. Stacey says good afternoon. Nuria's here, says good evening everyone. Yes, and that difference between afternoon and evening, Nuria's dialing in from Britain, in which case we're in the evening. Stacey and certainly Robert are coming in from America, so it's mid-afternoon there, or even early afternoon. Stacey saying she just made it in time, had to go to the local produce store. Well, that was a close one then. Becca says, evening everyone, hope you're all well. Sandra says, evening everyone. Oh, Kazia says hello. Nicola says good evening. April is saying hi everyone. Sandra is saying, I can't hear Kim. Is it just me or has anyone else got the problem? Nuria says all good here. Shashi says hi. Ben Craven says hello. Asim says greeting from Southam or Southam? Southam, I think. Okay, Sandra's got the sound back now. That's good. And Jackie's here from South Africa. Oh, glad you could make it again, Jackie. Cool. This is good. We have people in. We have. I'm not here sitting on my own, just talking into the ether, which is always good to know. Excuse me. Oh, Michelle's turned up and says hi everyone as well. Okay, so selfies. Well, it's not self-portraits. Selfies, I would say, really are a sort of subgenre of self-portrait. The self-portrait, I think, has been certainly it's been around for centuries. A few weeks ago, a couple of months ago, we were looking at the Dutch old masters. Most of them were busy doing self-portraits. Most of the famous artists you know from history tend to have done self-portraits. Part of the main advantage or appeal of self-portraits for artists is you've got a ready-made model. You know, you don't have to book someone in. You don't have to worry about whether they had to be somewhere else. You don't have to pay them. So if you want to try out an idea, if you want to try out a technique, if you just want to kind of improve your skills, then turning the paintbrush, or in our case, the camera, on yourself is an easy way to do it. And over the years, I've taken a lot of self-portraits, not from some kind of massive ego sense and love of my own face, but from just wanting to try out techniques and actually not having anybody else to photograph. So you want to try something out. So this has been around for, centuries at least, and like I said at the beginning, quite possibly at least since caveman times as well. Selfies are a much more recent phenomenon. We've all got our phones on our cameras and hold them at arm's length, take our photo. This kind of thing has now become so popular. They're very easy to dismiss, just like people taking photos of their lunch, putting them up on Facebook. But at the same time, it's a part of our culture. It is something that an awful lot of people do. And I think there's probably psychological papers being written at length on the popularity of selfies. I think part of it is a curiosity about our own face. I think part of it, and it's seeing ourselves from the outside. We experience the world from inside our heads. I see the world from behind these eyes. And from behind these eyes, I don't see myself unless I'm looking in a mirror or I'm looking at a portrait of me. So when I see a portrait, I see the world as others see me, which very rarely matches up to what our own expectations are. And so there's a kind of fascination with that and a curiosity with that, sometimes an outright fear of that. But either way, there's something about it that kind of makes you wonder. And then I think that, the culture, the social culture that has developed online, and in some ways even more over this past year. Today, in fact, is in Britain, they're talking about it being 1 year ago today that we went into the lockdown. The UK itself decided to go into official lockdown. And never more have we socialised through the screens. I mean, here I'm doing live video, and we all know the kind of Zoom calls and Zoom effects and what have you. But Instagram, Facebook, photos, we've been doing them for the last 10 years or more. With the technology of social media sites like Facebook and the phones having cameras on them. But I think there's become a new level of intensity of it over the past year. And part of it is almost like saying, hey, look, I'm here, I'm still alive. Or maybe it's part of a validation. Hey, look, I'm here. Please click like and let me know I'm still alive. So there's a lot of ideas behind it. But the thing is what this has kind of come out of is, in 2 weeks' time, we're celebrating here the 1 year anniversary of Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres. And if you've got ideas of what I might do to celebrate that, if you theme it or whatever, then do let me know. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But one of the things I wanted to sort of move up to was I started thinking about that notion of portraits and self-portraits as being something which I thought was an interesting thing to kind of explore. Portraiture is my thing. You know, I have photography skills, and across the year, through the feedback sections, the critique section, I've been, applying my skills to all sorts of genres of photography. But my heart is in portraiture. But then, of course, I can't take many portraits at the moment. You've seen a few that I've done of my daughter, but in lockdown particularly. So self-portrait is one of those things. It allows me to try out, experiment, and do things. Now, the selfie thing, a lot of people are doing. So what I wanted to do really was sort of start with a selfie and then move on and say, look, self-portraiture doesn't just have to be a selfie. And in fact, it can be a really rewarding photographic experience. It's really difficult. It's difficult on a couple of levels. First of all, there's a technical difficulty. How to get the camera in focus, where you want it, composed how you want, when you can't see it. It's slightly different with a selfie. You can hold the camera out there here. You can adjust it as you need to because you can see it. But if you've set your camera up on a tripod at a distance, you can't necessarily see it. So there's a technical difficulty in doing that. And I'm going to talk through some of those things as well. But then there is this emotional difficulty of putting your face out there. And if you're not one of these who regularly does selfies, then there's an incredibly intense self-consciousness to sticking up a photo of yourself, an embarrassment about it. There's all sorts of weird moods and stuff fly about. So we're going to explore some of this tonight. And hopefully by the end of this, I'll have given you a few tips and techniques, not just on how to take interesting photos of yourself, but how to get past some of those reservations. The comments stream, I see VG's arrived. Hi VG, glad you could make it. VG's coming in from India, so it's now sort of after 1 o'clock in the morning where she is. But if you have questions, comments as I go, I can already see that VG and Jackie are busy saying hi to each other. Leave them in the comments. I will check in periodically on the comments just to sort of see how they're going and answer any questions. So, right. So with that, let's start. Let's start with a selfie. So what I'm going to do here is go into that one. Now, I will say that for a long time, I didn't really get selfies. I understood self-portraiture for everything that I've already said, but that idea of selfie quite often just seems to be a, hey, look at me, I'm here. And to which it feels, well, so what? Why would I worry about that? Or why would anybody else worry about that? What's entertaining about that? I think one of the things where I really kind of first got a sense of this is fun. I really wanted to just mark the fact that I was here. And it felt on some ways quite ridiculous, but at the same time, I was having an awesome experience. I was in Morocco, in the desert, on a camel, with a group of other photographers, and I'd been sort of trying to ride this camel, trying to take photos as you're bouncing about all over the place. It's not a steady ride on the back of a camel. And I've got it's a full DSLR with a wide angle lens on, and I've got it at full arm's length. And I took this photo of myself. And what I really love about this really is you can just see on my face just how much I'm enjoying it. I mean, it really was an incredible experience. I absolutely loved being on the back of a camel in the desert, and I thought, I've got to capture this. I mean, I was busy capturing photos of other people on camels, photos of incredible sand dunes, but I wanted a photo of me there, and I thought, and so it was kind of fun. But that was still doing, I mean, also very heavy when you're using a full DSLR at the end, okay? But the first time I think I really then felt it with my phone. I just got a relatively new phone. So this is about 3.5 years ago, or coming up to 4 years ago. And my grandson was born. Nope, not that one. That one. And so this is Alfie. And at this point, Alfie is less than 1 day old. And here I am getting to hold this tiny little bundle. And I thought, again, I want to record this. This is now the perfect time for the phone. This is where it's going to come into its own. I haven't turned up there with a great big DSLR. I've just got my phone in my pocket and I'm able to whip it out, take a little photo, quick photo of me and my grandson, and then post it up on social media and say, hey, welcome to the world, Alfie. And it was a proud moment. It was a moment I wanted to record for myself, but it was also a moment I wanted to share with those I'm connected with. We are social animals. We are social beings. And that notion of sharing what feels important to us is a really primal part of being human, I think. And then depending on your levels of friendship, sharing not so important things, sharing what did I have for lunch, I was out having an interesting lunch, here's a photo of it, is still part of sharing. It's a communication, it's a connection. Lots of tiny little connections every day. It keeps reinforcing the connection we all have with other people. But certainly these bigger things kind of felt really important. I remember then having fun with down at the beach with my wife. I think that was possibly my birthday, and took a photo. Maggie doesn't always enjoy having her photo taken. She was quite happy for me to put this one up because the wind, of course, was blowing across her face and completely obscuring her. So these are places where I felt, this was kind of fun. This was, this really felt like selfies for a reason, selfies for a purpose. And at this point, it is pretty shallow. It's not deep and meaningful self-portraiture, but there is a kind of deep and meaningful quick selfie. And I think once I kind of experienced these things, I overcame a lot of my prejudices against selfies and started to realise, no, they could kind of be okay. Right, now I'm going to do a quick look back at the comments, because I realise these could build up quite quickly. April says, I perceive that I look like a different way, but a photo of myself does not portray that. It's like hearing your voice on the phone. Yes, in fact, actually, April, I will come on to that in a moment. Naria says, love the shadows. I think that's to do with that coming off the camels. Jackie says, for sure, I can't believe how I sound in a voice note, for example, as well as also how I perceive myself differently with what the camera shows. Robert saying, what a beautiful boy, Alfie. And bits and pieces. Oh, Kazia says, beautiful photo of you and your grandson. Sandra says, loving the selfies. And Vici says, lovely ones. Okay, well, I'll tell you what, I will address this point that April has mentioned there, which is about the fact that our photos don't look like us. And it is as different as when we first hear our voice, and our voice sounds wildly different recorded than the way we experience it. Nobody else in the world worries about our voice except us. And we worry about it because the difference between expectation, what we're expecting to hear, and what we actually hear is big. If there's not much difference, we don't worry about it. If the bigger the difference, the more it concerns us. We are used to hearing our voices reverberating inside our skull. When it comes out, it doesn't have any of that. So the pitch, the tone, everything about it seems different. Now, the same kind of thing seems to happen with photos. And one of the things about photos is our faces are reversed to what we're expecting. Now, some of you will have heard me talk about this before, but for those of you new to the concept, I'll just briefly discuss it again. Which is that we spend the vast majority of times we have seen our face is in the mirror. Maybe every day, cleaning our teeth, brushing our hair, if you put on makeup, if you washing your face. It's we're used to seeing our reflection, and our reflection reverses our face, but that's what we get used to. And because we are so used to that, when we see a photo of our face back the other way round, it is so weird that it makes us feel uncomfortable. But nobody has a perfectly symmetrical face. Most people, if you've got enough hair, you comb your hair, you part it on one side rather than the other. Eyebrows. One eyebrow tends to be slightly curvier, one eyebrow tends to be slightly pointier. 90% of people have one eye slightly larger than the other. I think my left eye sits fractionally lower than my right. A lot of men, people in general, in fact, but a lot of people will have, one side of their jaw is slightly more angled and one is slightly more curved. So if you take all these things and you reverse them, then it's you, but it's not you. If your nose goes 2 millimeters to the left, suddenly it's 4 millimeters to the right of where you're expecting it to be. And that makes you feel uncomfortable. In fact, I probably should have dug this one out earlier. But let me just see for a moment. I'm just going to try and find... sorry, let me do that. Go to pictures and go to photography development. No, it is there. Right, let's try that again. And hopefully I should be able to find, yes, that's the picture I want. Let me just show you briefly this photo of the Mona Lisa. Certainly in the Western world, one of the most famous paintings or portraits of all time. And the question is, which do you prefer? The Mona Lisa on the left or the Mona Lisa on the right? As you can see, it's been flipped. It's just a mirror image. Now, what I've tended to find is when I've sort of shown this in camera clubs or given talks on portraiture, generally speaking, about 90% of people prefer the Mona Lisa on the left. And that's because that's the way we're always used to seeing her. When you look at the Mona Lisa on the right, you know it's the Mona Lisa, but it's not quite right. It's wrong because that's not how you're used to seeing her. We've seen her on the left there our whole lives. So we're very, very familiar with that. When you look at her just on the right, it's not quite right. And that's a really important thing. So if you consider the same thing with your own face, you've been used to seeing your face one way round, and when you see it the other way round, it's you, but it's not you, and that just makes you feel uncomfortable. So that's really a big thing of what you're up against. So if you part of that problem then is if you want to know whether a portrait of you looks okay, you should really look at it in the mirror or flip it on the computer. And quite often people prefer that. And in fact, actually, a lot of phones now do their selfies in reverse so that people feel quite comfortable with them because they've essentially given you a mirror image of what it should be, but so that the person who's taken it feels comfortable with it. If you consider this, it's like, when you have the big family photo, everybody in the photo looks like you're expecting them to, but you don't. And so you become convinced you are the unphotogenic one in the family. Your sister's standing there going, oh God, I hate myself, don't I look awful? And you're going, don't be silly, you look fine, because she looks like she always has to you. And you think she's just being overly fussy. And you go, well, look, I'm the one who looks awful. And she goes, oh, don't be silly, you look great. And you think, well, now you think she's being overly kind to you and overly fussy about herself. Because you obviously don't look great, because you look so different to what you're expecting. And every single person in that photo is thinking the same thing. Everybody thinks everybody else looks fine, but they look terrible. And that, in essence, is why we tend to hate our own portrait. Oh, Rosie's come in and said, hi, sorry to everyone, sorry to be late. Rosie knows I've already talked to this one to Rosie a bit before, but I've just been talking about the flipped image and the Mona Lisa, Rosie, so you've not missed that bit. And yeah, Ben says, same thing happens if you look at someone else you know, or someone you know really well in the mirror, especially if they talk or smile. Yeah, somebody else looks a bit strange if you see them in the mirror because you're not used to that reflection. So that's one of the things you're straight up against. One of the reasons why we kind of don't like photos of ourselves is because our face is the wrong way around and that makes us feel uncomfortable. But generally speaking, the more you do it, the more you get used to it. I've done so many self-portraits, my reversed face no longer freaks me out. Similarly, my voice doesn't freak me out in the way that most people do when you first hear the recording of it. Back when I was around 29, 30, I spent a year in radio. And I remember first hearing my voice on the show, and it just sounded terrible. But then I got used to that's what my radio voice sounded like. It stopped worrying me as much. So the more you're exposed to it, the less you get freaked out by it. So start taking the portraits, the self-portraits, and you'll find after a while it really doesn't bother you to quite the same degree. VG says, I agree, always felt that way. It's strange to look at yourself in a photograph. Okay, cool. So let's do a little bit of carry on with the, I'll just close that and come back to here. Right, so now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take you through a bunch of more photos and start talking about the idea of trying to go beyond the selfie, because really where this is going is next week we're going to have the self-portrait challenge, and I want you to go beyond selfie. I don't just want let's show you what a standard selfie looks like. How many times have you seen this kind of thing where somebody's, you've got the phone, you've got the bathroom mirror, somebody's trying to do the duck face or the trout pout and whatever and into the thing, and they've not even taken into consideration you've got a towel hanging over the shower, you've got bits and pieces sitting around, they're just taking a photo of themselves, almost oblivious, and you think, why? What's that? And that's too easy, too cliche, done to death. So if you do that, you lose points. I don't want to see you taking a photo of yourself in the bathroom mirror, whether that's a selfie with your phone or even with a DSLR, because the other cliche, which is absolutely done to death, is this one. And again, this is just a natural light in the bathroom, and it's where you're being the mean, moody photographer and half your face is obscured by the camera and you've got this kind of aggressive, strong look on your face, and it's such a cliche. It's just, I've seen it so often, it's saying, I'm a photographer, and you can tell I'm a photographer because I've got this camera in front of my face. And you can tell I'm taking it in the mirror because if you look at this, Canon's written back to front. And it doesn't, okay, so if I see something like that, points deducted. So what I want you to do is start being a little bit more interesting and creative. Okay, so where are we? Oh yeah, Stacey says, I hate bathroom photographs. And yeah, okay, so Roy says, is there a prize for the most minus points? Yeah, kind of fun. Right, okay, so having said that, that's what I want you to avoid these kind of photos. So what do we want then? What are ideas? Now, some of these, some of you will have seen before, and that's fine. Some of you won't. So this one, for example, this is just, this is still very much at selfie level, but it's a sort of just a slight step beyond selfie, as in you can't see the mirror, you can't see the camera. Well, it's not actually done in the mirror. This one is done standing next to the window. It's straightforward window light. And the point I want to get across with this photo is the idea of you don't have to smile for the camera. And there's a really important point here, I think, which is about not feeling you have to look your youngest, your prettiest, your most smooth skin. I think it's more fun if you look interesting than rather than trying to look your best self as such. So if you've got a side light coming in, a side light tends to enhance the landscape of the face. You know, all the wrinkles, the skin bumps, the nose, the shadow, you know, because you've got shadows coming from the side, it's the least flattering. A lot of people do the bathroom because there's light bouncing around all over the place. So actually what happens is the wrinkles kind of just seem to disappear a bit because you've got like a wall of light and there's nowhere for the shadows to hide. But it's a duller photo. It's a more interesting photo, I think, if you have a side light. This was done exactly the same way. If you want to go, you know, these days we have masks with COVID, you know, but if you're going to do the eyes, get in and really do the eyes. Do something interesting with the eyes. Now, this one was done a few years ago, and this was one of those ones where I had an idea for lighting. I had two static lights, and I wanted just one either side, and I didn't have anybody to try it out with, and so I'm leaning right into the camera. I've got these lights coming from the side, and so it's a very particular kind of lighting and shadowing that I wanted to try out. So if you have access to lights, play with light, see what you can do with that. Stacey says, I like that one, very serious. VG says, it's going to be nightmarish challenge, not only because it's self-portrait, it's going to be really challenging to focus, run back, pose, set, repeat till you get it right. Yes, there's going to be a lot of technical challenges with this. And I think, but that's part of the fun of it as well. I'll come on and give you a couple of hints and tricks about getting it in focus. You know, well, okay, let's just say for the moment, I mean, one of the things to do is if you have an object, now it can be a pillow, it can be a teddy bear, it can be a balloon, it can be a little mannequin or whatever. Find something and place it where your head is intending to be. And then go around, focus the camera and make sure it's absolutely in focus in the place where you're going to be. And then flick the focus from auto to manual focus. If you're not already on manual, put it on manual focus, and that will stop it resetting every time you set it to go. If you have a remote release, you can get a cable to click it. That's fine. If you don't have something like that, set your camera for a 10-second timer. Make sure it's all lined up. Then click it, and then go around and get into place. So use of a 10-second timer is a really good one, but focusing on something where your head is going to be is the other important bit. So, where are we? Okay. What's that? Rosie says, wrinkles disappear, must go and live in the bathroom. Okay, right. Becca says, right when I'm most self-conscious about my appearance. Yep. And doesn't. Yeah, we're all self-conscious about our appearance. So, okay, let's move on to the next photo. Nope, wrong one here. What's this? Oh, Becca's saying, all right, lockdown weight. Again, well, okay, I'm just going to say again, I think the real thing about this is to get past the idea of thinking that you have to look your best. You don't have to look, and what we consider our best as well. You don't have to look your thinnest, your most smooth-skinned, your youngest, and all the rest of it. These things are kind of boring. Make yourself into a character. Okay, I'm going to come on. Let me move on with these photos because I think this is okay. Playing around with lighting. This is just getting fun and silly. Smoke machine, lights going off. You can be as, you know, if you've got the equipment, you can muck around and have fun. But at this point, we're still talking about straightforward self-portrait. If you want, you can play around with it, you know, try and double it up. So we've got taking a photo of a camera, taking a photo of myself. And for that required a second camera and a bunch of mirrors, and that was way too complicated to try and do. Even more complicated, some of you might have seen this one last year, where what I'm doing is essentially, so the camera is sitting where the mannequin is just now, okay? So it's pointing this way. So if you were standing, if you were right where this mannequin is, this is pretty much the view you would see. So you can see I've got, hang on a sec, there we go. Yeah, busy talking away while I'm not actually showing you the photo that I meant to. Yeah, so here we are. So yes, what you can see is we've got the webcam here, we've got the screen, and so what I wanted to do was I wanted to have the picture sitting where the mannequin is, looking over my shoulder, and I'm operating it because I've got the thing tethered to my tablet, and if you look down here, I can see this is what the camera is seeing. And so I'm just literally clicking the button there, which, as you can then see, is clicking the button there, which further in is probably clicking the button there. So sort of infinite regress, except for the fact that I run out of resolution. And so that's allowing me to take the photo of myself. But what I'm doing is I'm then looking into the webcam so that my webcam image, which is on the screen, is then actually the one that's looking at the camera. So you can play around like that, and you can sort of have lots of fun. Right, what have we? Oh, sorry, what else? Just take a quick look here. Okay, so yeah, Becca was complaining about lockdown weight. Sandra says grey hairs, can't wait to get to the hairdressers. Oh, grey makes you look more distinguished. It's much better. Rosie says liquefy in Photoshop, and that's about getting rid of weight. Jackie says, actually do have a mannequin, she'll practice on her a bit first. Yes, practice on something else first. Get the hang of what your camera settings are supposed to be. That will make life easier. Stacey says, less beard and trimmed differently. This is very true. My beard has been growing pretty much since before, whilst I've always had the kind of the front bit, and I was sort of, you know, take it down a little bit. Since just before Christmas, I've just not bothered shaving the sides. And so, yeah, this is getting longer and greyer. VG says, why people smile on photos, the greatest camouflage technique to hide out in the open. Okay, I'm not totally sure. I'm with you on that one, VG. Why do people smile for the greatest? Unless it's that thing of basically the fact we smile. Yes, we smile for photos because smiling is a mask. It stops other people kind of seeing what we're really thinking or feeling, and then capturing that for all time. But I think it becomes more interesting once we sort of stop doing the smile. But again, it's not necessarily revealing something about yourself. It's more about playing a character of something. Okay, let's. Well, what else have we got up here? Oh, Ingeborg's in. Hi, glad you could make it, Inga. Oh, Nicholas saying yay for grey. Yes, I think you should embrace the grey for sure. Okay, so next photo. So what I wanted to talk here was about the idea of play a character. Now this one I took. I had one of these kind of caps. There's a TV series called Peaky Blinders on the BBC. There's 4 seasons, 5 seasons now, I think it is. And they wear these kind of hats, and it was coming up to season 5, and I thought, I've got one of these hats, so I'm just going to sort of do a photo in the style of, it's basically set in the 1920s. And I thought, well, I'll use a collarless shirt and a waistcoat and just sort of play around. Now, they didn't use that style of beard back in that program, but I wasn't going to shave my beard off for it. But the point here is that, again, what I'm trying to do is create a character. It's not about this is who I am naturally. It's not about creating a sense of I have revealed some inner truth. I think one of the biggest lies about photography, untruths about photography, is that a good photo somehow captures the essence of a person. As though we only have one essence. We don't. We are multiple complex people. We all laugh and cry, feel fear, anxiety, hope, love, desire. which is the real one of us? Any photo is capturing us for 125th of a second from one angle under one set of lighting conditions. How can that possibly represent who we are? It can't. Thinking a single snapshot can represent you is like thinking a single note can represent an entire piece of music. It can't. One note on its own makes no sense unless you understand the notes that came before it, the notes that come after it, and the notes that are running alongside it. We get to know people through time. We experience people through time. Photographs don't give us that time element. But what it means is we can use that to create images, to fake it, to play. Photography then becomes the ultimate dressing up box. We can do whatever we want. If we change the angle of the camera, if we change the lighting, if we change the hat, if we change the expression, we fundamentally change the mood of the photo. And that is really exciting. There's an infinite amount of possibilities of things you can do with portraits. And self-portraits, it's just overcoming that hesitation where you go, oh yeah, but I look a bit older, I look a bit uglier, I look a bit, my skin isn't as smooth, my hair's grayer, I've put on weight, I've lost weight, I've aged, whatever it is, whatever that bit about you is that you don't like. Find there are these things you don't like. Actually, hardly anybody else cares. Nobody really cares. If you're a mum or a dad, your kids love you anyway. You love your parents. You don't think about, oh well, I would love my mum, but she put on a bit of weight, so I don't anymore. That kind of idea is so alien, so bizarre. And yet, your kids are the same. They don't think about the way you look, other than the fact that when they look at you, they see their parent and they love you. Or your partner, or your friends. Your friends, you meet up with your friends. The first time you meet someone, you might notice if they've got a squint, if they've got strange colour hair, if their jaw sits at all, their nose is at a funny angle. Doesn't matter. These things you notice first of all because it's your brain identifying them so that next time you meet them, you'll be able to recognise them from somebody else. When you've known them for a while, you don't see these things anymore. You just see your friend. You don't see anymore the shape of their nose, the colour of their skin, the colour of their eyes, the size of their body. You don't notice these things because they're not important. What's important is your relationship with them. So we need to kind of get past the hang-up that we have to look in a certain way, otherwise we're going to be judged terribly by other people, because actually nobody else cares. But it frees us up. So what we can do is we can play a character. And if you play a character, like I'm doing here, then you don't have to worry about... It's a way of getting around the judgment, really. Because, if you're up on stage and playing a character, or you're in a film playing a character, if Al Pacino is playing the bad guy, a villain, you don't think he is a villain. You know he's playing a character. So however villainous he becomes, you enjoy it in the movie, but you're not worrying too much about whether it's revealed the real Al Pacino. So similarly, I think one of the great fun advantages about playing a character is that it frees you up. It allows you to play a character without... And actually, the more ridiculous you look or the more different you look, the better. And the more kind of exciting it is, especially for people who know you already. You go, oh, that's kind of fun, isn't it? So it is really like I say, it's kind of, for me, it's like the ultimate dressing up box is the camera. And, then you can just sort of play around and create these different characters. Here's another one I was just playing with. I've got a top hat and, pair of blue, well, I think they're purple glasses on. Yeah, these ones which have ended up with a blue tint. And then what I've done is I've added in Photoshop, I've played around and added a kind of textured overlay to it to sort of create this sort of grunge effect with it. So, if you, once you've got the photo, you can then edit. For those of you who've got editing software, whether it's just the kind of quick Instagram filters, or whether you've got full-on things like Photoshop or GIMP or something like that, you can have a whole new level of fun by editing and making these things more moody, or and shifting just everything I've talked about with photography, about create a narrative, and then everything you do, from the outfits you're wearing, the background you've got, the props you've got, and the editing you do, should be reinforcing that narrative. What's that? Stacey thinks this has got a kind of a bit of a steampunk look to it. um, so yeah, and I think this is, so again, what I'm trying to do is get across the idea of, with this, I'm not trying to make myself look like me. I mean, you've been watching me some of you have been watching me for a year now do this. Is that who I am? Is that photo who I am? No, I'm playing a character. I'm having fun with it. I'm a cartoon character. This looks like something you would find in a graphic novel, which is really what I was exploring. If you have Photoshop, you can then have lots more fun. This is taking two photos, one photo where I'm looking straight ahead, one photo where I'm looking off to one side, like that, and then I've blended them together, so you end up with this really weird, strange look. I'd seen something similar and I thought, I wonder how easy it is to do that. And actually, if you got half an idea how to use Photoshop and you've taken two photographs in exactly the same lighting conditions from exactly the same angle, and the only difference is you've gone click and then you've gone click, then it's really quite easy to do something like this. Another fun one actually was playing around, where I actually turned the thing upside down. Now, easier to do when you've got a beard, because I was able to sort of blend the beard up here into the hairline coming across. Slightly trickier if you don't have a beard, I suppose, or okay to do if you don't have a beard but you also happen to be bald. That could be a kind of fun way of doing things as well. But character then. If even if you don't sort of have huge Photoshop skills or access to these kind of things, you can still create a scene. Now this is a very, very basic scene. I just thought I'm going to have a little bit of fun here and have that kind of grumpy, haven't yet had my third cup of coffee first thing in the morning, don't talk to me yet kind of feel. It's, throw on a dressing gown. The mug I've got, that is one of my mugs. For those who aren't au fait necessarily with British culture, the phrase "who's the daddy" is it's like a boast. It's like, who's the best, who's the greatest, who's the most wonderful. You go, yes, who's the daddy? You've just done something, and yes, I'm really, oh wow, aren't I the greatest, aren't I the best? Who's the daddy? I'm the daddy, yes. But of course, this was bought for me by my daughter, whose daddy I literally am. So it's a nice kind of little play with that mug. But deliberately sort of sticking on grumpy face, that, and then having this mug and just kind of... So even something as simple as the kitchen table can become a place to create a mood, an idea. You can, if you want to create a bigger scene, some of you may remember this one, those of you who were around back in September. My wife and I had our silver wedding anniversary. Of course, we were in lockdown, we were in shielding, we couldn't go anywhere. So I decided I wanted a photo of the two of us, and we did it out in the end of the garden with the garden shed. And the garden shed being a place of great significance because that's where we go for our coffee every morning. To our shed cafe. It's a habit we started shortly after lockdown. So about 3 or 4 weeks into it, about mid-April last year. We realised we just needed to escape the house once a day. We couldn't go to cafes anymore, so we decided we would actually take our coffee up to the shed, and we do that every morning. We go to the shed for our cup of coffee, and all through the winter there's been layers and layers of thick gloves, barely able to hold the mug, but it's a wonderful retreat. And so I thought I wanted to take a photo of the two of us, and I'll do it at the shed because there was significance for that. And for this, I've set the timer and then run round and got into place. Come back, checked it, realised I wasn't in the right place, adjusted things, run round, got back in again. I've got an off-camera flash inside the shed which has got an orange gel on it, and that's helping to light up the inside of the shed as well. So I'm playing with the lights, but you can do this as well if you want to, whether it's for yourself or whether you can rope in, whether it's your partner or children or anybody, or you've got a friend you're in a bubble with or a flatmate or something like that. You can create scenes and then sort of set up a larger scene. What have we got here? Sorry, just check. Oh, right. Becca said, very trippy upside down picture. And Ben says disturbing. Yes, it rather was. Um, April talks about a new Star Wars character look. And oh, right, now Robert's noticed, yeah, we're onto the world famous garden. Well, world famous, I suppose, given the fact that you're in America, Robert, and BG's in India, and what have you. So we are around the world, yes. But you can create the scene. Now, the other thing you can do is you can get creative as to where you decide to put the camera. I've seen all sorts of variations on this. I put the camera inside the fridge. And again, you set it on 10-second timer. And what you might want to do in this case is set the flash to go off as well, so that it's lighting you up. But whether it's the fridge, I've also seen beer coolers, lots of beers sitting in the doors. I've seen this kind of thing done where it's been sitting in a washing machine, obviously not while it was on, or a dryer, but the camera's been put inside and you've got somebody opening it up. So that idea of placing it somewhere so the camera is giving a viewpoint of the person doing something else, opening a door, grabbing something, pulling a book off the shelf, pulling a pepper out of the tray, opening a beer, removing washing. So anywhere around the house, you've got potential places where you could place the camera. Again, stick it on a 10-second timer. If necessary, stick a flash on or something like that to go off, to light you up, such that when it does go off, and it can have that kind of caught you in action kind of look to it. So there's a lot of opportunities for playing around with that. So following all this, I've got these kind of things, but what I thought I would do, particularly for this episode, I thought, well, this is all very well. Everything I've shown you so far is stuff I've done in the past. If I'm going to go out and ask you to do a self-portrait challenge, I kind of feel like I've got to do this myself. So all last week, I was trying to come up with an idea of playing around, looking up online. Looking up self-portraits, looking up interesting self-portraits, awesome self-portraits, ideas. If you type these things into Google, you will get taken off to places where people have been doing interesting stuff. So there's plenty of places for inspiration out there. Go and take a look and see what just appeals, and then think, I like that, how would I do it? And so there's these kind of things, whether they're self-portraits, but also this idea of creating something maybe a bit more theatrical, a bit more cinematic, that idea of being a character again. I think it's really a lot of fun to just be somebody else. So what I did was I've been looking around and I saw a couple of photos that somebody done where you had somebody sitting at a table and there was a light above and behind them coming down, which was creating a lovely kind of light on the edge of a hat they were wearing and across the shoulders. And so this is like the first shot I did. This was a little test shot just to see what it actually looked like. And you can barely see my face, it's just too much in shadow. I've got my whiskey in front of me, I've got a trilby on, so I'm trying to go for some kind of moody, almost film noir kind of feel, slightly period kind of feeling. I did a collarless shirt again. I will say that isn't actually real whiskey. I was very tempted, but in the end we decided to go for cold tea. So now that light, like I say, so what I've done is I've got a table, I've got a black backdrop, and I've got a single light. So in fact, actually, I've still not taken it down yet. I've got a soft box that I'm using. I wonder if it will actually fit in here. I'll try and put it back here. It's a little narrow kind of soft box. You stick the off-camera flash in the back, and then I had that sitting above and behind me. Let's just flip that back over so you can see this a little bit bigger and better. So this is a softbox. Flash goes in the back. That bit falls off. And then this is the light that's then coming down behind me. I've also got a grid on it, and what this grid does is it stops the light falling out, spreading out too far, keeps it in a relatively narrow band. So for those who were interested, that's what that was for. So having realised with this though that you couldn't really see my face, what I decided to do was set up a second picture a second light off to one side, and now you can see that I've got light shining at my face, and I've got getting the side light so that I've got shadows moving across my face. So having got that, well, okay, what can I do with this? So now here you can see I've got this is much more that kind of, this is quite a lot like the photos that I saw. You've got, kind of like a bit like a kind of grizzled detective from a movie, sitting at a table, whiskey in hand, interesting lighting. And I thought, yeah, okay, but in a way that's a bit cliche. What can I do to play around with it? So I then sort of, okay, sort of stick your hand, squeeze up the face a bit, can you make, and I thought, well, okay, that looks a little bit more interesting. But we got this other idea. I've been playing around. I thought, in discussions with my wife Maggie, I was chatting, because originally I was thinking, I suppose very cliche, I was thinking like, well, what if you got like a deck of cards, in front of you? And Maggie said, well, hasn't that kind of been done to death a bit? And I thought, well, yeah, she's kind of right there. And so we started bouncing ideas around. And what we ended up with was coming up with an idea of packets of seeds. This is really relevant to now at the moment because the gardens are starting to explode and Maggie's got seeds planted in little seed trays all over the place at the moment. And we thought, well, okay, let's have a bit of fun. So here's little Ted, star of the show on the left. And we thought, well, okay, let's take this kind of grizzled person, and it's like, okay, which seeds are you going to pick? Come on, make up your mind. And it's just trying to play around with the standard kind of tropes and traditions and have a bit of fun with them and sort of throw in an extra level of, oh, well, I wasn't quite expecting that. But still within this, and I got to this point and I thought, and I was quite happy with this, but I thought, kind of the part of the problem here is I'm still trying to look a bit cool, really. What if I wanted to be a bit more character? Let's try something else. So I pushed the hat to the back of my head and then did this. And now I look like I'm kind of half drunk. And I thought, that actually looks like more for that. That's, and it's not flattering.
You can't see little Ted.
Oh, you can't see little Ted. Oh, right. Sorry. Okay. This is a real shame. Hold on a sec. Right. Yes. Sorry. I needed to show you little Ted here. Go back. So, yes. I didn't realise. So, yeah, my wife's just pointed out. So, yeah, little Ted was hidden behind me. So, yes, really important part of the photo. Let's just try and stretch that out as much as I can onto here so you can see the photo with little Ted in it, the key part of the story. And so, yeah, like I say, so at this point I was sort of still trying to look cool. And so then I thought, well, okay, let's do this. And just, because he's a character then. And it doesn't matter that I'm, now I'm looking less heroic. I think it's just more fun. A little tilt of the whiskey glass in my left hand there as well. And then what I did, so we did this shoot on Sunday, and then yesterday I played around editing up, and that's, here we have the final edited version of that, where as just to sort of, from that to that. So as well as playing with the light and the colouring and what have you, I don't know how well you can see it on your screen, but in the background there's a bit of kind of brick wall as well. Might be a bit dark, I'm not sure how well that's coming across. So this allows me to sort of play, I've got Photoshop, I've got editing skills, so I kind of play around with that. And there we have a kind of fun, and it's a million miles away from a selfie. It's still a self-portrait, but it doesn't really feel like a self-portrait. It doesn't feel like, it's not a look at me, aren't I handsome, look at me, aren't I beautiful. It's here's a character within a story. And that is what I want to challenge you to. That is really what next week's self-portrait challenge is I want you to be a character in a story of your choosing, where you can be the hero, you can be the heroine, you can be the villain, you can be a bit part character. I want it to have a sense of a scene. I want it to have a sense of, well, I wonder what happened next, or I wonder what just happened just before that. And if you can start playing with that, it will be a nightmare to take, but it will be so rewarding, so much fun. I think there's a huge, if we're talking about why are you doing, we're doing photography because we're obsessed with photography. We talked about this the other week, that the difference between us and our mates who just take a few photos with our phone is we're obsessives. There's something about photography that grabs us. We want to also master what we're doing. We want to sort of wrestle it to the ground and take control of it. We get frustrated when we can't do the stuff with the camera. When we try and take a photo and it doesn't work, rather than just going, oh, well, forget that, then I'll go and take up pottery or macrame or something like that. We keep going at it. We go and watch more YouTube videos. We ask our friends. We tune into this program. We submit your photos for feedback or critique. Ask me questions. Whatever it takes in order to try and master it. And that obsessive quality that we have, I think, is, so we're wanting to improve our photography. And I think playing around with self-portraiture is a way to help do that. And I really would recommend. I suspect, I fear that I might get fewer submissions next week. I hope not. I hope some of you will really challenge yourselves. If you are really, absolutely, totally, I hate the way I look and there's no way I'm sticking a photo up of myself, be creative. Be creative. Create a character. Create a character with the outfits, use scarves, use drapes, use shadows, use reflections, use half reflections, use light kind of streaking across part of the face so only part of it is revealed. Get creative that way. More than happy for that. So that's where we're at. So next week's self-portraiture challenge. Hopefully I've given you some ideas here. And like I say, if you can get past the idea of the self-consciousness of yourself, play a character, then I think it makes it a lot easier. But it's so much fun then to design a photo. And this is a big difference between capture and create. Most of the photo photography is capture. You take a photo of the bird as it lands on the bird feeder, or you take a picture of the sunset. This is create. You are setting the scene. Just like when we did the still life. The still life was all about you are creating it. And this now becomes a still life, but with you in it on some level. So I hope you will take part. Right. That's what I'm going to talk about there. So let me now flip back, see if we've got any more comments. Somebody said, hi, Ted. Inga says, love the surprising narrative here. VG loves the photograph. Becca says you look like you're having a merry time. Timberlane Golden Retrievers, an image that shows you a story is much more interesting to look at. I absolutely agree. Welcome, Timberlane Golden Retrievers. I don't recognise you being here before. You are more than welcome. Thanks for joining in. VG says, big shoes to fill, but I'm sure we're all going to have fun to enjoy this challenge. Becca's put up a laughing face and says, I will overcome this fear and participate. And Rosie's saying, use a mask. If you will overcome your fear and do it, that will be fantastic. Rosie, be careful with the mask. I do still want to know that it's you on some level. Cool. That was a lot of fun. Okay, Michelle says she's really going to try this. Brilliant. I'm glad. I've absolutely poured my heart and enthusiasm into this to desperately try and convince you all to take part. I would really love it for as many of you that can take part as you feel that you can. And I think you will benefit from it. And then next week, we'll just go through the portraits, the self-portraits, and have some fun. And hopefully inspire each other as well. See what we can come up with. See how everybody else has tackled this idea. I think it will be a lot of fun. Right. Okay. Oh, Jackie says, for sure, hold your attention for longer if there's a story. And Ben says he's up for it too. Brilliant. Cool. Okay, well, quick thing about the, just to say once again, that if you would like to support these podcasts, there is buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is the place to do so. Yeah, right, okay. Need a moment to catch my breath just while I'm just going to pour everything into that and decide what we're doing next. Of course, what we're doing next now is the critique section. We won't have a specific critique section next week because next week's going to be the challenge. But having said that, if you are having problems with your self-portrait, if there are specific things you're running into, when you submit, or you can still submit your point and say, look, I was having problems with this. Any idea how I would have got past this? Tell me your sticking points, and certainly I will do bits of critique on those who would like it next week as well, so we can do that. This week, however, we have 5 people have sent in their images, and so what I'm going to do now is go through these ones that were sent in. And I think what we will do is I will. All right, where's my thing? Start with Sandra. Okay, so right. First of all, I'm going to slot that back in there so that it's not blocking my screen. And so Rosie says, what type of lens would you recommend? Just before I get on to Sandra. Oh, well, that depends entirely on the kind of shot you want. If you're going to use your 300 or 600mm lens, then you're going to have to run back a long way to look into the back of the camera to see whether it worked or not. Wide angle is fun for working in small spaces. If you're going to put the camera inside a washing machine or inside the fridge or inside a bookshelf or something like that, then you really want as wide angle as you can possibly go. And for some of you, to be honest, you might even find your phone works slightly better. The phones very often have a very wide angle, a wider angle than a lot of our cameras do. So sometimes you can get if it works better with your phone, do it with your phone. You're using whatever tools you've got, and your phone can be a tool. You don't have to be snobby about it and say it has to be done with a DSLR. Is what makes it work. So yeah, your lens then, Rosie, wide angle is a possibility. But then if you're also not wanting, if you're wanting to kind of come in on a certain area, then use a bit more of a zoom. Use a 50mm, use a 70mm. I mean, the photo that I took with me showing Little Ted the Seeds, I think I was using my 24-70, probably at about 50mm zoom in there-ish. So choose your lens depending on the story you're going to tell. Okay, Timberlane Golden Retriever says, how do you send in your images? Right, okay, good point. So, see this Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres. There is a Facebook group called Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres. Type it into Facebook, it will come up. Join the group. You can either join as Timberlane. If you're going to be Timberlane Golden Retrievers, give me a name as well. So give me a name to hang on to. If you want to join as your Golden Retrievers page, that's one thing. If you want to join in person, that may be slightly easier. But join the group. I'll let you in, and then submit your images into the group. And and then next week, I'll share them. Make sure you tune in at 7:30 on Tuesday. Okay, right, so let's go back into the critique section, and what we're going to talk now about is Sandra's photo. So Sandra, where are we, is here, yes. So Sandra sent in this photo, and what Sandra said was, here's a before and after. So this is the after, And I'll tell you what, let's stretch that out now because I think we're okay with that. And here's the before. And what she says, here's before and after of a version of a photo I took of my nephew in London. Feedback welcome on the impact of selective colour. Selective colour. Now, I thought this was quite an interesting thing here because selective colour is the idea where you black and white most of the photo, but usually one bit of colour or one aspect stays in colour. Now, in this case, we've got two aspects that are staying in colour. We've got both the big smiley face in the background and we've got Sandra's nephew's sunglasses kicking in here. Now, the thing with selective colour is there are those who love it and use it all the time, and there are those who absolutely hate it, and rarely that many people in between. It does tend to polarise people. And one of the problems with selective colour is that, in a way, two things. One, it's been done to death. It started off, I remember when probably somewhere about 10, 15 years ago, people suddenly realised if they had Photoshop, they could take out a particular colour. And it really cropped up, first of all, in like wedding photos. So the wedding photo, the photo would be in black and white, except for the rose the bride was holding would be in red. And it was this splash of colour and you went, wow. And then there were films like Schindler's List, where the whole film is in black and white. But there's this one scene where he's looking down on the street and you see this little girl running in the distance and she's got a red coat on. And it's the only bit of colour in the whole film. And so for a while, selective colour, you're selecting a single colour and making it the highlight of the photo, became a really popular thing. And then it just got kind of absolutely done to death. And the next big problem was it was used kind of in the wrong way. And what I mean by that is what selecting a single colour does is it draws all the attention to that one thing. It means that it's the very first thing the eye sees, because everything else is in black and white. The first thing you see is the bit that's in bright colour. And your brain then also decides, because it's the first thing it sees and because it's in colour, it is the most important thing of the photo by a long way. Now, if we take a look at this photo in colour, then what happens is there's a bright orange face behind it. That's vying for our attention because it's bright orange. But what we also have is we have a face. And we as humans are pre-programmed to automatically look at faces. And we've got a slight problem here in the fact that both of these are vying for our attention. That face, if that face behind was in purple or soft blue or pastel or something like that, then all our attention would go to the face, and then the face behind would then become like an echo of the man. And that would be slightly easier. Instead, what's happening is we've got two faces and one of them is brightly coloured, and it's dragging our attention away from the person wearing the glasses. Whereas I think the person wearing the glasses is really the point of the story. And if we go back to this thing that I talk quite a lot about, which is understand the narrative, understand what is the most important part of the story. And if you're taking a portrait, if you're taking a photo of your nephew, and you're taking a photo of your nephew wearing these funky glasses, then that's the important part of the story. Graffiti behind is supposed to be adding texture and supporting the photo. But instead, because that's so bright and orange, it's actually overpowering. Now, when you then put that in black and white, that becomes even worse. That, I think, even it overpowers everything. So let's just put this in Photoshop for a moment. And what I want to do is desaturate that completely. If I go to hue saturation, desaturate. So now we're without colour. And without colour, you notice we sort of breathe slightly easier, because now we go back to the face and we go, right, it's a picture of a face. He's got funky sunglasses on. Oh, look, there's graffiti behind him. That supports this idea of where he is. It's sort of slight cyberpunk feel to it. And then we notice in his glasses there's shapes going on, and when we zoom in, we notice that there's more graffiti on the wall in his glasses. So that kind of becomes fun. But without that, all the attention gets drawn to this spot here, and I think it just kind of creates an overpower. Now, the one thing that I would say, if you really did want to include the selective colour, you could maybe get away with it just in the glasses on their own, like that. And then what that does is that says, hey, these glasses and the reflection in the glasses is the most important part of this photo. The fact that there's a man wearing them is secondary, is a support act to the most important bit, which is the reflection. And if you think the reflection is the most important bit, then you have the selective colour of it. If your nephew's face is the most important part of it, then having the selective colour is drawing the attention away from it. So that's really the main thing to remember about the notion of selective colour, is selective colour not only draws the eye, but it tells the viewer it is by far and away the most important part of the photo, to the exclusion of all else, to the point where everything else in that photo is just a poor supporting actor to that selective colour bit. And it's where it also utterly fails with wedding photos. I know a lot of people like that picture of the bride with the red rose, but the problem is it means the photo is all about the rose, and the bride is now a support part to the rose, not the other way round. The rose is a support part to the bride. The bride is the most important part of that photo, and having a selective colour of anything other than the bride isn't going to work. And then just having the bride selective colour would just look a bit stupid anyway. So there's very, very few circumstances where selective colour will work. Generally speaking, you want to say, no, avoid it, unless you really have a really clear idea about what you want to use it for. I did do a photo once where I did a black and white, and it was a very kind of stylized, high contrast picture of a woman in black and white, and she'd taken her lipstick and she'd smeared her lipstick across her face quite deliberately, and I just left the lipstick in red. And that sort of worked, although I still sometimes have my doubts about whether it did. But I think if you're going to do something like that, then at that point the smeared lipstick was the most important part of the photo, but it still ran the risk of overpowering the rest of the face. So I hope that helps, Sandra. I hope that gives you some kind of ideas on that. Okay, let's flip back. So what have we got here? Okay, so Rosie says, lovely strong image, Sandra. Becca saying, very cool, Back to the Future type glasses. Stacey saying the red coat was symbolic in that scene. Ben says, what I think is interesting is I didn't notice it was selective colour at first. Okay, well that's interesting. I suppose that bright orange was so overpowering you just assumed the rest of it's in colour. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Rosie says, we'd like to see the colour just in the glasses, and obviously that was put probably just before I did that. And as Ben says, does the selective colour always have to be the most important thing? I think really, Ben, it's a case of it forces itself to become the most important thing. The thing is that whatever selective colour, in a black and white scene, you notice the colour, unless you are colourblind or have difficulties in that way. And so the viewer automatically assigns importance to it. So if you do it on the wrong thing, I mean, I've seen photos where there's been quite a nice scene between a couple, and there's, say, been a jacket thrown across a chair in the background, and that's the bit that's being kept in colour. And that's not the most important bit, and it just draws the attention away, and you start thinking that the jacket is the important bit. So I think that's so if you are going to try and create something using selective colour, then you really ought to make sure that the selective colour is the most important. The thing that you're using selective colour for is definitely the most important part of the photo. Okay, Inga says, I guess you can have selective, more subtle colour on a minor object, so you may need more time to notice it. Yeah, you can kind of work with that as well. Okay, or sometimes you can be slightly more subtle about it, where you sort of semi-desaturate. You don't go full black and white, but you kind of tone down a lot of the colours, and then maybe you allow one or two aspects of colour to be sort of slightly brighter, so that it's not obvious unless somebody really knows what they're looking for. But you can pull somebody's attention around the picture, but a bit like you can by brightening or darkening certain areas of the image. You can sort of saturate up part of the colour or desaturate other areas in order to draw the eye to the place where you want it to go in the photo. But that's more subtle use rather than the straightforward black and white with a spot of colour. Right, okay, so let's move on then to the next one, where I'm going to look at Roy. So Roy sent in this rather wonderful photo, or rather shapely photo. Says, "Hi Kim, this is taken inside one of the domes at the Eden project in Cornwall. I like the photograph, but could I have improved its impact in some way? Does it need a more definite focal point?" And I think the answer for that is yes. And I think what you've got here, Roy, is you've got you've looked up, you've seen the dome, you've got all these incredible hexagon shapes all over the place, and so you've taken them, and that's fine. But what's happened is there isn't a clear focal point, and what you've also done is you've very heavily vignetted around the edge of the photo, so it's dark in the corners. What that's doing is drawing you right into the middle of the photo, except for the fact that in the middle of the photo there isn't really a lot happening. Let's just open this in Photoshop a sec. Let's close Sandra's photo there. And I think with this, we've kind of got there's patterns here, but there's slightly larger patterns here. We've got a line running through the middle. There's a little line running at the bottom. And I kind of almost want to sort of see what's through there. You've got a bit of a tunnel, but not enough. And it kind of feels a bit like an in-between photo. And in a way, I think if you wanted to really do just grab the pattern, go for abstract pattern, then you could pretty much do something like where you just grab a section of. And here then what you've got is pattern repeat. And whilst the hexagons are all, they're not absolutely even because they're starting to curve out. And these other lines, you've got the curved lines coming through. So something like that, if you're talking about an abstract image, is sometimes you get competitions which talk about abstract or talk about just line and shape. You could probably play with something like that. And in fact, what you might do even is play with the contrast, sort of the brightness and the contrast, up the brightness, up the contrast a little bit, maybe got too much of a vignette still on that, but if you went back to the original. So what you're then doing is playing with the notion of strong lines. Another option here is if you wanted to keep part of the changeover, I think what you could do is, see, I think there's an interesting little kind of diagonal running through here. And if we kind of do something like, and in fact even tilt that a little bit, something like that, there, I think that becomes slightly more interesting as well, where you're just taking a section of it, and now what happens is you have a strong line running through here. This central set of hexagons sort of run up to the corner. Maybe we could actually tilt that a bit more and make the diagonal a little bit stronger. But now you've got a kind of strong line, a strong diagonal line, and then you've got a cut across from there, a little cut across from there, and we've got the diagonal line running through there. And I think that's creating an interesting shape. So if you're going to really go abstract and play with it, Roy, I would say you want to sort of think a little bit more along those lines. These then kind of give it a little bit more either of a repetition pattern, like we had with the other crop, or some sort of abstract but movement, the movement coming in the diagonal, as we've talked about before. So Hope you found that one useful there, Roy. Let's close that. So, okay, still talking about selective colour. Rosie says, I did a selective colour on 2 boats in the harbour of Port William, which I felt worked quite well as they were in the foreground. And what else have we got here? Oh, right. So VG is saying the honeycomb structure and crisscross wires, a great place to take a photo. And April likes the lines in the hexagons. Okay, so what we're going to do now then is move on to now Becca. Becca says this picture was more of a happy accident, and so let's not that. Sorry, turn that down. Double click on that, and then flip across. There we go. And what she says is, I thought I'd play with the distortion function on PixArt. I've attached the original image too, which is this. So that's the original image. I made it black and white to detract from the bird poo all over the fence post. What are your thoughts on the distortion techniques? Which is where she's done this. What I'm unsure of is I feel like I've made it too dark almost in building the rather demonic creature that now appears. And sort of this sort of strange creature that's sort of being created out of it. But if I lift the shadows, it doesn't have the same impact. Okay, so what's happened here then is Becca has taken a photo, this one, and then she's now I'm presuming PixArt is an editing app. It's not one I'm familiar with, so I'm afraid I can't comment directly on that particular app and what effects you can do with it. But there are plenty of apps out there, or Photoshop, which sometimes has a few kind of quick things you can do, but you can sort of set about creating things. And really what it's about is taking a photo and playing with it and then seeing what you can do with it. If in the end the photo isn't doing really what you want it to, maybe you need a different photo, or maybe you need a different editing technique. I mean, this thing here, where what's essentially happened is part of the photo's been taken and then flipped. So, okay, let's take this, let's open it in Photoshop. We'll just close Roy's photo there. And in essence, what's happened is, if we take something like, I can't remember exactly where it is, I think it's sort of there-ish. If I copy that, paste that layer on it, and then reverse just that layer, so I transform, flip horizontal, and then what I can do is I can move it into here, line it up until we end up with a mirror image like that. Now we've got that, I think what she's done is change it to, okay, cancel that, various shades of blue. So, you know, if we do some kind of blue like that, and then do some kind of gradient map, reverse, not perfect, lighten it, soften it, it doesn't really matter. The point is, you get the idea. It's then a case of playing around until you find something that you find interesting, really. Part of the problem you've got with your photo here, where you've got this sort of, this almost like this little kind of spider creature coming out of here, but it's blending too close to the background, is because the picture is kind of, I don't know, where are we? The greens in here are kind of too, you've already got greens and browns in the background, so there's not enough to distinguish. The green is, the green leaves are clear against the lighter part of the post, but they're the same tonal range as the background. So when you look at your other picture, not that one, hitting the wrong bits. When you look at this picture, there's not enough contrast between this top part and the background, and that's really why it gets lost. So that's about trying, when you take the photo, trying to take the background. And I think there's a difference between, really, it's the difference between out there taking a photo of something you want to take a photo of and sitting back at your computer with a photo going, what can I do with this? And randomly pressing a few things on your app and suddenly going, oh, that looks kind of interesting. I'll play with that a little bit more. And that's really just for getting out and playing with. I mean, this idea of taking something and reversing it, taking part of it, you can really play with doing almost anything. I mean, if I take, okay, I'll take a photo I was going to talk about later, or use as an example later. So we've got a squirrel in a tree, right? Let's say I decide to copy that, paste it, and edit, transform, flip horizontal. And then come over here and just line that back up like that. And then let's crop the image in. Now we're way beyond squirrel. We don't know, we might guess that part, because the little tuft and the whiskers, we might guess that maybe it came from a squirrel originally. But now we've got an entirely different image. Something which has a different mood, a different feel. Have we got some kind of creature here? What is this merging out of the darkness? And then you can, we could take that into camera raw filter and what do you say? Let's give it a strong vignette and let's go up here and then let's add more texture, add more clarity, desaturate partially, boost the blues and greens, do something like that. And now we've and you can just randomly sort of keep hitting buttons until you come across something that you think's interesting. Sometimes that's enough in itself. You found something interesting, it does it for you, you like it, and that's good enough. Sometimes it can act as like a thumbnail sketch. It can act as a trigger to going, oh, there's something in here I like. I haven't got it with this, but it's triggered an idea, and now I can go away and try and more clearly take a photo of the kind of thing that I want to do. And I think that's the real important bit as well. So really, Becca, it's just a case of play. Editing has been around for as long as photography has been around, and even longer in terms of painting. Painting is editing. There is no such thing as truth with painting. You're deciding what you're putting in, what you're leaving out. And photography, exactly the same. We even go back to the days of when it was just glass plates. People were painting on the glass plates in order to remove wrinkles or make someone look a bit slimmer or younger or smoother skinned. You can do the same thing then. There's nothing wrong with it. Play with it. Have fun with it. As for what I can do to improve a particular picture, I don't know that there's a lot I can do because you're chasing something and you're using a different program to what I'm doing. But I think really, go as far as you can with the picture you've got. If it's the picture itself, you can't go any further and it's not satisfying you, but it's giving you a taste for something, then try and work out what it is you're really enjoying. If you're enjoying the spikiness, if you're enjoying the reflectiveness, if you're enjoying contrasts, see if you can then go and take another photo, but this time with purpose rather than with random, a total random accident. Random accidents are fantastic, but they're good starting points for then developing something else. Occasionally a random accident ends up being better than what your original idea, but more often than not, they are a trigger for new ideas. So I hope that helps there, Becca. Okay, so where are we? Let's see if we've got any more comments. And Ingo really likes the solution with the contrasting diagonals. April likes the line in the hexagons. Roy says, thanks for the comments, Kim, but I prefer my original. Absolutely fine. You're allowed to. What I'm doing is I'm giving suggestions. I'm giving ideas and thoughts. In the end, each of us is chasing something. When it's the bit that I keep talking about. When you bring your camera out, you've got an idea, you're chasing something, and that's what you go for. If I was standing in the same place and you handed me your camera 2 seconds later, I would take a different photo because I would be chasing something else. But with these, hopefully what I can't, I can't necessarily do what you were trying to create, but hopefully what I can do is give you some other ideas, other thoughts to play with. Okay, so where are we? Becca says, yes, editing app on the mobile. Okay, and Sandra likes the mirror image version. Cool, right, okay, where are we up to? Whoa, 9:10. So we've got a couple more photos to go through, and so now we're coming on to April. Now, I think I did see April was here earlier. She asked me to hold on and leave it a little bit later because she was going to be caught up with other things. So hopefully, April, you're here. Now, basically, April's photo was this. She says, I'm trying to learn if this photo is considered shallow field of depth photo or depth of field. The landscape is blurry in the background. I read that it can be blurry in the forefront and background, but does not have to be. I would love to see other examples out there. Thank you. So I thought what I would do with this one. This is really, if you have a DSLR or a bridge camera where you can adjust the aperture, shallow depth of field is all about your aperture. If your camera's on auto, it will sometimes widen the aperture for you. Now, basically, the depth of field is how much is in focus when you take the camera. A shallow depth of field means not a lot. So if you take a photo of something, that bit might be in focus, but a little bit in front, a little bit behind will be out of focus. If you've got a deeper or bigger depth of field, then all of this in between might be in focus. Now, whilst without doubt the background is blurry in this, it's not in focus as in focus as the butterfly. When people really talk about, if you're talking about like the competitions like you get on Photo Crowd or Viewbug or Guru Shots and things like that, when people talk about a shallow depth of field photo, what they're really wanting is something with a very shallow depth of field. They're wanting something with what's known as bokeh, or that might be one way of pronouncing it, B-O-K-E-H. Translation of sort of anglicised translation of a Japanese word, which is about the quality of the blur in the background. And actually at this point, I suppose, if we go back to the squirrel photo that I showed you earlier, this is much more of a shallow depth of field where we have exactly what you're talking about, where it's not just blurred in the background, it's blurred in the foreground as well. So you can tell that there's little branches in the foreground and there's branches in the background, and beyond that branch it just gets completely out of focus. We can't even tell what's in the background anymore. The depth of focus is so narrow that there's not a lot in it, to the point whereby the eye is in focus and the front ear is in focus, but even the ear behind is starting to go out of focus. It's so narrow. And what you're doing is you're playing with that quality. And when you get people asking for you to submit images to competitions or contests where they talk about shallow depth of field, you want to try and get it as shallow as possible. And for that, you want a wide aperture, which is a low f number. So what I'm going to do here, I did a set of photos earlier in the summer, which I've never got around to doing anything with. They might well end up in some course I make at some point in the future. But what I did was I got a bunch of cones, pine cones, sitting on a little bench in the garden. And so side on, this is what I'm dealing with. So we can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cones sitting on a table, all evenly spaced. Okay, that's the setup. Then what I did was I went up to sort of one end and I focused on the third cone in, or maybe I think I only shot 5 of the 6 cones, but let's see. Yeah, here we go. So I can't. So and this I'm using a 50mm prime lens. For those who've got it, your nifty 50. So it's a fixed lens. You can't zoom in or out. It's 50mm and it goes to f1.8, which is a really wide aperture, which gives you a really narrow depth of field. And so within this, what we can see is this cone, parts of this cone, the front edge of this cone is nice and sharp. Where you can really notice it is down on the edge of the table here. Part of this table, that's how much depth of field there is. The bit that's sharp, that's the only bit that's in focus. And the further you go out from that, the more out of focus it becomes. So that's a very clear cone. The cones either side, the cone, are still cone-like. By the time you start getting to the cones at the end, you wouldn't know whether they were cones anyway. You can guess, but you wouldn't necessarily be totally sure. There could be a hedgehog there, but so that's set at f1.8. That's as wide an aperture as I can get with the shallowest depth of field you can get. So then what I did was I put the aperture, I narrowed it a little bit to f2.8, which is still quite wide. And what you notice here is there's a little bit more starting to come into focus. Then I went to f5.6. So now I'm narrowing it a bit more, which is giving us a deeper depth of field. And now we can see much more clearly that those are definitely cones in front at the end. We're also starting to really notice that there's buildings in the background there. If we go back to this, we might guess that it's buildings, but we can't really, we can see that there's a window shape-ish there, but we can't really make it out. By the time we get to f5.6, we can actually see this window is split into two, an upper part and a lower part of that window, which here you can't see at all. You can just see a vague blur. f8, now the background's coming more into it. f11, f16, and f22. And by the time we get to f22, we can see the background really clearly. Now, it's not to say that it's in complete focus. It isn't. It's still a bit out of focus. But at f22, we've now got a much deeper depth of field. It's not shallow anymore. You wouldn't call that a shallow depth of field picture. So much of the table is in focus. We can see the splinters coming out up here, which we couldn't see earlier. So I think really, to be honest, that's probably about the best example I can give of depth of field. The wider the aperture, which is the smaller the f number, so f1, f2, f3, these things are very wide apertures, give you a very narrow depth of field. The narrower the aperture, the deeper the depth of field. So hopefully then that gives you that sense. And just like do we still have that squirrel photo? Here's a robin photo, similarly done with, I think that was an f2.8, where again what you can see is the branches and everything disappear out of focus very quickly, and so you can use this effect if you want to isolate a subject. And now a robin in a tree, the tree is very, very busy, there's branches all over the place, but if you have a narrow depth of field, as you go down to something like an f2.8, then you can isolate it because the background becomes blurry, and the thing you're trying to focus on, whether it's the squirrel, whether it's the robin, whether it's the butterfly on the flower, it separates it out from the background much more. So getting to understand your aperture is a really useful thing. So that's how you play with depth of field. So I really hope that helps there, April. Okay, let me close a couple of windows here and see what else we've got. Okay, so Becca says thanks. Rosie says stunning butterfly. Is this UK? Okay, April says no, I don't have a DSLR. I have a PowerShot camera, which I just got a new PowerShot today, updated. Took this picture with a 12-year-old camera. Right. Okay, Sandra loves the butterfly. VG's heading for bed. Fair enough. It's very late. It's coming up towards 3 o'clock in the morning for VG, so that's fine. You catch up with the rest of it in the morning. Ben says, reminds me of pictures I found amongst my dad's things in a row of clothes pegs stuck in the lawn, testing the depth of focus with his new camera sometime in the 1960s. Yeah, I mean, in the end, it's one of the best ways to learn. Whether it's cones, whether it's clothes pegs, whatever it is, line a bunch of things up on a table, on the lawn, on a washing line. Keep your camera steady, either you're resting it on the table or you've got it on a tripod. Take a bunch of photos and just adjust the aperture settings and notice the difference. And the more you do that, the more familiar you will become with doing it. Okay. Okay, cool. Right. So a few people saying good night to VG and April saying thank you. Important info to remember, says April. Cool. Okay, excellent. So now what I want to do is I want to move on to Robert's photo. Where, to be honest, Robert, are you watching? Are you listening? Are you tuning in? I know from a conversation we had once before that I'm sort of one of several screens that you've got at home. So you might be busy watching something else while I'm on one screen and you're kind of listening in. Now's the time to turn your attention to me if you're about and you're not caught up in a meeting. Because Robert sent me a photo, and kind of what he wrote with it felt more like a challenge. And so let me show you the photo. It's the photo of the horse, and then I'll read what he said with it. So Robert said, in sending this horse, I decided not to edit it, but that doesn't follow. I know that it doesn't follow the rule of thirds, but I don't think that's always required. Fair enough. So I guess the question is, how could I edit it? As for the composition, this horse was not very cooperative. Well, horses they never work with children and animals. That's because you can't get them to do what you want. It's much more accidental whether you get what you want. She wanted me to feed her, and she kept moving directly in my way. This was one of the best shots that I got before she got to the fence. It was difficult to get a good composition with her moving so much. Fair enough, we all have these kind of problems when you're photographing animals. I know the horizon is a little askew. I suppose that could be corrected, though I didn't like it very much and thought it looked a little bit predictable. When you sort of straightened it. Okay. Let me know what you think about the editing, if you think that it needed it. So, kind of it feels like, Robert, that what you've done is you've given me a photo. You said, well, it could be rule of thirds, but you don't need rule of thirds. It could straighten the horizon, but I didn't like the straightened horizon. How would you edit it? Does it need editing? So I kind of had to think for a little bit. Well, how do I respond to that? Because this, on a very simple level, if you don't think it needs editing, if you're happy with the photo, then you're happy with the photo. You don't need to submit it. Why submit it to me if you're happy with the photo? Put the photos in for critique because there's something you're trying to achieve or you're not sure about something, and then maybe I can help you with it. But I'm going to take this as you feel that there's something there but you're not sure what, and you're just wanting really another pair of eyes. Really, I suppose the point that I want to get across here, Robert, is that there's any number of things you could do with this photo. And it's down to what you want. One of the things I keep talking about, and just mentioned it earlier with Roy, is the notion of what are you chasing? What were you trying to get with this horse when you were taking the photo? Maybe you get it, maybe you don't. There's that thing, also like saying with Becca, there's the photos where you're out there trying to get something in the camera, and then when you come to editing, you're just tidying it up. Then there's the photos where you're not sure if you've got anything, and then you get to the computer and you edit it, and you then turn it into something which is usable where maybe the original photo wasn't. And either you're happy with this photo as it is, or you want to try and turn it into something else. And if you want to try and turn it into something else, you then have to sort of have an idea of where you want to go with it, or you start playing. So let's play. I'm going to show you several different things you could do with this photo, just for a bit of fun. Okay, so let's just close Becca's, and we'll close that squirrel, and we've come to Rob's photo. Now, what I will also say is I noticed with this is it's a huge file. It's something a 50 megapixel file. I think you're using the Canon R5, which I must admit I've got my eye on as one of these, which maybe when I come out of lockdown I might actually invest in. But the very big file does actually give you more to play with, because you can zoom in and crop and still have quite a detailed photo. But let's go with this for a moment. Let's just actually do what would happen if, so this is our photo, if I straighten the horizon, and okay, let's do content aware so I don't chop the top of his head off. Now that puts him fairly central. So what I want to do now is let's do rule of thirds. I might just need to pull out a little bit here so I can see what's going on. And we'll do that. So we've got a rule of thirds, and using the content aware. Now it won't know what to do over on the right, so I imagine that'll end up fairly messy. But it gives us an idea, starting point, of what this might look like with a straight horizon and a rule of thirds as a kind of basic standard. Now we've got a few funny bits of tree in here, so I suppose if I sort of take that and then just loop that out a moment, and maybe take that bit out as well. And so now we've got a little bit of cloud, a stormy cloud over there, a little bit of tree hanging in there, and we've got a horse sitting on. And does it look so bad, rule of thirds with a straight horizon, or has it improved it? I think there's something quite interesting. I mean, one of the things you've done here is you're taking this at ground level. So you're looking up, so the horse is very kind of big and majestic, and it's got a big, and actually having a big sky behind it probably worked quite well. And having it in the middle, if we go back to, let's close Becca's photo, and if we go back to here, you do have sky either side of it, but all this big sky over on the left here isn't really doing anything for it. So you don't need as much sky. I think you're going to have more sky. You have it over on the right here because of the way the horse is curved. And then if you've got interesting cloud patterns, that's kind of giving you texture in that space as well. So that's one thing you could do. Another thing you could do is you could actually crop in and have like a literal horse portrait. Just go for the head. I mean, you've got umpteen megapixels on, on this, so there's still room to play with that. And at this point, so let's Control J. Let's do a quick filter, camera raw filter, and at this point we can do the quick play, give it a vignette. Do auto edit, brighten it up a little bit, and there we go. We have a horse portrait looking straight down the lens, with curiosity or with disdain, depending on what mood you happen to be in. Okay, if we're going to do horse portrait, let's go black and white. So better change this back so it doesn't end up blue and white. So black and white. So let's do a gradient map, shift, and then let's take the curves, and we can take it down like that, and then bring up a little bit more contrast. Maybe not quite as strong as that, but something like that maybe. And in fact, I'll tell you what we could do. If we just go back into camera raw filter, maybe play with the texture and texture a little bit, but clarity, a little bit more in the way of clarity. And there we go. So now we've got mean, moody black and white horse portrait. So there's another option. Other things we can do, if we could pop back to your original photo. Now, you've got him at an angle. You said you don't have to have a straight horizon. This is true, wonky horizons can work. But it's also, if you're going to do wonky horizon, why not go for a real wonky horizon? So let's create a kind of a square shape, rough square shape. And then, again, content aware for the moment. Actually have him at a real angle, like that. Let's kind of then create that kind of diagonal, something like that. Get him going the corner to corner diagonal. Got the content aware, hit that, and there we go. So now we've got it's that sort of slightly interesting way, sort of into the diamond shape of the picture. I'm And again, you can sort of do that sort of slightly more contrasty look to it if you wanted. So there's another style of thing you could do with a horse. Or if we go back to this horse in the first place, and let's just tell you what, let's just do a slightly straighter horizon at the moment. But what I'm going to do, I talked earlier about the notion of you're looking up. So you could do big sky above. So let's stretch this up. Something like that, actually have him in the bottom 2/3 of a picture and have a big sky above him. So let's just see what that looks like for a moment. And now you've got that, especially with a kind of diagonal of the cloud, you can maybe create a slightly more interesting cloud texture up there if you wanted. You've got this real sense of looking up, and it's all about the sky. It's not about what's going off to one side. It's not about the field. It's not about the tree. It's not about any other horses in the background. It's about him and your low position and the big sky above. Or finally, if you really want to have a bit of fun, then what we do is let's sort of take that to the shoulder. I'm going to copy and paste that, and then stretch that up, and now we have a kind of cartoon horse. So a bit of fun there, Robert. I hope you enjoyed that. Just this idea that really there's no end to the directions you can go. You know, whether you want to straighten horizons, do rule of thirds, create big skies, create close-in portraits, do close-up headshots, cartoon eyes, do more sky, turn diagonal. It's fairly endless. So the problem is not so much what you can do, but almost narrowing down what you can do. There's any number of things you can do. So what are you chasing? What do you want out of this? What's grabbing you? And it's one of these things I've said before, and I will keep saying because I believe it's the most important thing with photography, is try and articulate to yourself what it is. Articulate what it is you are chasing, what it is you find interesting. What is it that at the point you brought the camera up to your eye, why have you brought it up to your eye? What's exciting you about what's in front of you? What is it that you're trying to capture? Is the excitement what is it about the animal? Is it the animal? What is it about the animal? Is it the animal, the context of the animal? Is it the personality of the animal? Is it the mood that you're getting from the animal? But that's, you know, shooting the horse or a butterfly or a squirrel or a robin. But it's also the same if you're photographing a bridge, or you're photographing a wide open plain, or you're photographing a narrow road. There's something in there that you have found interesting. And if you can identify that, then it makes doing what comes next much easier. It's the decision-making process of deciding, well, actually, what I'm really interested in is, and then changing the angle of your camera, changing the settings on your camera, and then when you get back, editing it in that way as well. So, I hope you found that one useful, Robert. So, now where are we? We'll just check a couple of comments. There's a few comments here. Quite a few comments here. Okay, April's going off to pick up her son, right? Forgot that clocks had gone ahead in the US, right? yeah, daylight savings time. It happens in the UK next weekend. So worth remembering, next week, if you're out with the UK, the time will change by an hour, quite possibly. So watch out for that. Robert saying sorry for the challenge with a scowly face. Robert, come on. Having a little bit of a laugh here. So Rosie says, lovely horse, Robert, is she yours? And Robert says, no, saw her driving in the country. A couple of Timberlane Golden Retrievers, says she's beautiful. Robert says, it is an R5. It was a birthday present from Anne. Wow, what a birthday present. Yes, I do have a little bit of camera envy for that, because that is like the next one I've got on my list that I kind of drool over when I think about upgrading my camera. So Inga says, I was tempted to crop it just under the body, even if you usually don't crop away the legs, makes it more majestic. I suppose that's kind of getting in close. Rosie likes the horse portrait. John says 1,000 times better with level ground. Before it looked like he was falling over. And it's one of those things where sometimes the horizon needs straight, but you don't always have to, and that's why I sort of showed you could tilt it other way. John likes the black and white headshot also. Sandra likes the black and white. Robert says, now I'm not sorry about the challenge. It's great to see how much you can do with a photo. Lots of great ideas. Okay, good. Roy likes the contrasty black and white headshot, thinks it's powerful. Jackie also likes the close-up black and white. Michelle also liked the rule of thirds in the horse photo. Cool. Okay, so lots of feedback with that. So that's pretty much where we are with that. That's all the photos that have been sent in. So now, before you go running off, quick reminder about a few things. First of all, is in 2 weeks' time, really importantly, 2 weeks' time, is the anniversary edition of Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres. I will have been doing this exactly 1 year. I would like to do something particular with it. I'm not going to set a challenge. Maybe it is set a challenge. Maybe it's do some kind of review. But I'm looking for ideas. Okay, so go to the Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres Facebook group and leave me ideas. If you're not on Facebook and you're watching this on the YouTube recording of it, email me, message me, or write in the comments of this any ideas. Something you think that might be a good, cool thing to do for the anniversary edition. I'll come up with some idea if nobody else does, but it'd be really nice to know if there's anything anybody else would like to know or see. So if you have ideas, please let me know. Next week, reminder then, the self-portrait challenge. Okay, again, if you came in late, when this is over, or catch up on YouTube or whatever, go watch the first half of this podcast where I talk in depth about self-portraits, and hopefully will enthuse you to create your own self-portrait, where ideally what we're talking about is not just a selfie, but to create some kind of scene, like something theatrical, something cinematic, something interesting, something out of a book, something out of a movie, something from a song. It doesn't really matter, but you want to create a scene which has you in it in some form. Take on the role of a character within it, and I think it's huge fun to do. It's hellishly frustrating, but incredibly rewarding. Really worth having a go. And I'm dying to see what people are going to come up with that. Last little reminder that if you found this interesting, if you've enjoyed these, if you enjoy these podcasts and would like to support and contribute to them, then buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is the place to do it. And I've recorded this. By tomorrow afternoon, it will be up on youtube.com/Kim Ayres, or on my blog, kimayres.blogspot.com, where I will also have some kind of accompanying blog post. That's pretty much it. Thank you ever so much to everybody for turning up, for comments, for submitting images, and I'm dying to see what you're all going to come up with next week. And Ben says, I now need to go and ponder what characters I can inhabit. Absolutely. Have some fun with that. And that's it. Right. So until next Tuesday. But in the meantime, stick your photos into the group. Invite some friends as well. If you know anybody else who you think might be up for this, invite them along. Do that. Okay. So where do we go now? I need to do that. Not that one. Not that one. That one. End screen. Okay. And there's a few people saying good night. Maria says good night. Another session. Great session. Thank you. Stacey says thank you. I'm cooking but enjoyed. Kazia says good night. Great podcast. Inga says thank you everybody and good evening. And I will see you all next Tuesday. Cheerio.